Hi everybody, my name's Natasha Ramirez and I am 20 years old and I've been a Christian for about 3-4 years now. I'm about to tell you my testimony and my trials and tribulations and my experience with God so far. Growing up, I had no idea who God was or what he was or even that there was a God. I didn't even know there was a God. My idea of God was a coconut sitting on a plate with some candy around it and some money that my mom put in our living room, and I would go in there and pray to it for whatever I wanted as a child. Anyway, it's pretty funny, but when I was in 7th grade in middle school, I was very outgoing and partying and doing drugs and basically doing what everybody else is doing, following along with what everybody was doing to fit in. In 7th grade, my father started to make a change for the best. He started just being super different, just in every way, in a good way. And it made me so curious as to what it was that made him change all of a sudden. I found out that he had just become a Christian, a Seventh-day Adventist. Just to make it short, to me, a Seventh-day Adventist is we go to church on Saturdays instead of Sundays because Sabbath means Saturday, and in the 10 Commandments it says keep the Sabbath day holy. It doesn't make a difference to me. I love everybody anyway. But he became a Seventh-day Adventist. From then on, I started becoming very curious as to who God was and why it was that he had made my father change in such a good way. One day, I skipped a whole period to sit down with my math teacher from 7th grade. I'm not going to say her name just so she doesn't get in trouble. I sat with her because I knew she was a Christian, and I asked her a whole bunch of questions about God. I was so curious, and if you're a Christian, you know that when you're first starting out is when you're most curious about God, and it's such an awesome feeling because you want to know so much and you absorb it all, at least for me. She told me everything about God. Well, not everything, but we just sat there for a while just talking about God. After that, my life started to change because I started knowing more. And with knowing more comes consequences because you know from good or bad. My mom became addicted to Xanax, or bars as they call it on the streets. Xanax. And she was a medical assistant for 17 years. She lost her job of 17 years for writing out prescriptions to herself. We found out she was addicted once she separated from her husband at the time. And as soon as she separated from him, is when things started changing for me, at least. I always had a very high dependency on my mother. I took her for granted, but I depended on her for everything, really. And so once she became addicted, I saw a whole new woman. I saw a whole new light. And I was only 15, so it struck me as very traumatizing, you can say. 3 months into the separation, she found a man named Jeff. And as soon as they started going out, she moved in with him. Even though her whole life she would tell me and my sisters as kids that it doesn't matter if we had to go under a bridge, that we would go with her, that we would never leave her side. She left me with my grandmother and my aunt, and she basically treated me like an adult already. I was 15 years old, and she said, here's a car, and here, go to school. Just do you, pretty much. I was hurt immensely by the thought of her even leaving me like that. Her love for this guy that she just met is more than her love for me. I was so hurt and depressed that I started getting into drugs and everything. I realized after a while that was no way to go. So I decided to move with my dad in Georgia. I moved to Georgia, and the moment I moved to Georgia, I realized that it was God sent, I was getting straight A's. I started my sophomore year in Georgia, and I was getting straight A's. I was going to church every Saturday, talking to God every day, growing within Him. It was just beautiful. And Georgia, where my dad lives, you just see pure nature. And to me, it's like you just see God in the world, and it was so beautiful. But if you're a Christian, you know that as a new Christian, you still are learning, and you are going to be tempted, and you will fall because you don't have the experience within God to know better. So that's what happened. The devil blatantly tempted me. I started talking to this guy, I'm not going to mention his name, that lived in Miami, and he had a Mercedes, and he had money, or whatever, and he started talking to me. He said, you should just move back, I'll take care of you, da-da-da-da. And as a 16, 17-year-old girl, I'm going to fall for it, It's really stupid. But I asked my mom for some money to get a plane ticket to go back. And I did. And she sent it to me. And I just left. Left all the beauty and everything in Georgia. And I just left Georgia to come back to a mess, really. When I got off the plane, I never spoke to that guy ever again. First off, I never even met him. Goes to show how the devil works. When I got off the plane, I got hit and struck with such a depression, with such a pain, with all the feelings that I was trying to run away from. Hit me. As soon as I came to Miami, it's like a complete different environment. My mom came to pick me up with my sister. I have 2 sisters. And I found out my mom was even worse than before. She rented out an efficiency for me and her. And how I found out she was worse? Because I saw all the stages of an addict, I guess. I would come home from school, and she would be eating, and she'll just fall right into her plate of food. That's how high she was. And it hurt so bad to see her like that, because it's like I was looking at someone I didn't even know. When I would see her like that, it would make me feel, obviously like an immature girl, it made me feel like, why can't I get high? She's running away from her problems, and I'm sitting here trying to face mine. I want to run away too. It's the easiest way. So I dropped out of school, and I moved in with my boyfriend, who was the one who also introduced me to a lot of different drugs. I experimented a lot. just because of the pain that I was going through. But through living with my boyfriend, I met his grandma, and she was a housekeeper. She cleaned houses for a living, but yet she had everything she wanted plus more. She owned her own house. She owned her own car. She was always shopping. It was so funny because she would buy me stuff all the time, which who doesn't like that? She was so sweet, but she was hard to live with at times because obviously she has her own way of living. But what she did teach me is that God is your provider always. He doesn't stop providing ever. Ever. And that's what she taught me. It doesn't matter what's your occupation or what you do for a living, God will provide. Just like the Bible says, He provides for the fish, the birds, and everything. What makes you think He wouldn't provide for you? Aren't you worth way more? So that's what she taught me, which I took from that experience. After I dropped out, I started going to Florida Career College. And like 2 weeks in, they helped me get a job on the upstairs of the building. I didn't know how to make a resume. I didn't know how to dress in an interview. I didn't know nothing. But I was getting closer to God, so it was a blessing. I walked in there with gym clothes and some really ugly tennis shoes, and they gave me the job. $9 an hour, full-time, amazing hours. It was a customer service representative position. It was a blessing, honestly, in disguise. But I took it for granted. Obviously, as a newborn Christian, I didn't know how to handle